to be whether who were the people that voted for Donald Trump, and were they serious about electing him? And the answer is yes, they were serious. We know this because people who aren't serious about things don't go to rallies, for one thing, not even for a good time. So they were the people that are the easiest to talk into things are the individuals with moderate self-esteem. These are the people that you can convert to your way of thinking. People with low self-esteem.
Can I close?
Yeah, sure. Argue over here.
Just not this one.
Okay. People with low self-esteem, they wouldn't even go to the rallies. People with low self-esteem are very difficult to convince because they're also the individuals that during the election they said, I don't trust politicians, I hate politics, I'm not going to have anything to do with it. The people with high self-esteem, of course, are the individuals that were really into the election. The people with moderate self-esteem were the ones that were the independents, were the ones that actually changed their mind during the election. There was a lot of stuff going on during the election. The Trump tape came out. There were questions about Russians interfering with the election. Hillary Clinton's emails came out, Benghazi came out, a lot of things to really think about and to argue about. But of course, these individuals would just ignore it, just ignore all of that information, and they didn't vote. They're the ones that never vote. The people with high self-esteem voted, and the people with moderate self-esteem did vote, but the people with moderate self-esteem were the ones who if we looked at the Republican Party prior to the election, nobody would have predicted that a rogue, rebellious individual like Donald Trump would be nominated by the Republicans. But these are the guys that he was able to convince. The individuals with moderate self-esteem. Okay, we already talked about that. If the message provokes favorable thoughts, it will persuade us. If the message provokes us to think of contrary arguments, we remain unpersuaded. If we know that someone is going to try to persuade us, we are more likely to counter-argue with that select individual. It wasn't very difficult for me to determine whether somebody was actually trying to give me information or trying to persuade me during the election, because those were my friends, and I knew that that's what they wanted to do. So it was easy for me to counter-argue. I mean, I was always coming up with a counter-argument as to their arguments. When an issue is considered trivial, argument or even propaganda can be successful. So if it's an unimportant part, and of course this is one of the things that was going on during the election, there were just tons and tons of propaganda coming out. Most of it had to do with the Russians. The Russians were the ones that flooded the media with all this propaganda, and most of it was pro-Trump. Some of it wasn't. Some of it was pro. Some of it was very controversial. It looked like they were trying to get the people to be angry at African Americans. So they were. One of their propaganda tools said, once the election is over with, we can take over, that kind of stuff. Things, and theoretically it was being published by a black organization. It wasn't, of course. It was being published by the Russians, trying to stir up things in the United States, and it worked. Distraction disarms counter-arguing. If an individual can be distracted, they often will be too distracted to counter-argue, and that is one of the reasons why, if you notice some of the advertisements, they were using sex, they were using attractiveness to distract people so that they wouldn't even think of counter-arguing. Uninvolved audiences use peripheral cues. The reality is that almost all of your advertisements are using some trick. Most of them are using distraction, and this is one of the reasons why when a Budweiser commercial comes on, you know, what do you care about, horses? Well, if you care about horses, then of course you're going to watch the Budweiser commercial to see the horses, but that will give you a favorable opinion of the beer. Now, you may not like Budweiser beer, you may never have tasted Budweiser beer, but if you ever go someplace and order a beer, well, you may order Budweiser because of the damn horses, as stupid as that sounds. You may drink Coca-Cola because of the polar bears. This is all distraction. You may not care about Coke, you may not drink, you know, the argument between Pepsi and Coke, you really don't care, but you see the polar bear on the can and you decide that you have to drink it. And this is all a distraction. The music that they use to advertise pharmaceuticals, oh, it's magic, you know, that whole thing. It's the only one that comes to my mind at the moment. But they use old 80s and 90s music to get people to think about this. Well, these are the individuals, the people that were listening to the 80s and 90s music are the ones that would potentially be using the pharmaceuticals. So which one are you going to use? Well, you're going to use the one with the cool song in it, of course, obviously. And that's just distraction. It's trying to get you not to think about the substance that or the pharmaceutical that you're dealing with. Uninvolved audiences use peripheral cues. Trivial matters or uninvolved audiences tend to utilize peripheral cues rather than cognitive cues. And so if you're not really paying attention, and this is what happens with advertisements, you may go to the bathroom, you may go to the kitchen to wash your glass out or whatever. You're not really watching the commercial, and of course, because of that, you're not really thinking about what they're trying to advertise. But if it raises an emotional, it raises emotion with you, especially if it has one of those 80s songs. Now all of a sudden, you know, you're hooked. You're not even thinking about it. You can't counter-argue. We can get people to think about issues by asking rhetorical questions, by making people feel responsible for the issue, and by repeating the message. And of course, repeating the message is the most common way of convincing people, is just by repeating the message over and over and over again. Eventually, and that's what Trump was trying to do with the Mueller investigation. He kept calling it a witch hunt. He kept calling it a hoax. He kept saying there's no collusion. Every time a little piece of evidence came out, he said, "Look, it proves that there's no collusion." He was hoping that people weren't paying that much attention, and potentially there were a lot of people that weren't paying a lot of attention. They weren't that interested. Only political scientists like me were really concentrating on what was going on. So we knew that what he was saying was, you know, it was just noise. But the people that were listening to him, the people that believed him, the people that, or the people that were tired of hearing about the Mueller investigation, the repeated message, that's all they remembered. So potentially, there are a lot of people in the United States that don't care. And they're at the point where they're ready to repeat whatever they've heard. And of course, the main message that he has repeated over and over again is that it's a hoax, it's a witch hunt, and there's no collusion. A cult is a new religious movement characterized by distinctive ritual and beliefs related to its devotion to a god or to a select individual. One of the methods of capturing their audience is by isolation. They reject everyone else and they try to isolate the individual in a select place. They see all other cultures as evil. They tend to be headed by a charismatic leader. Jim Jones is one of these individuals. You guys probably don't remember Jim Jones. He took a group of individuals down to
Jonestown?
Jonestown, yeah. Yeah, you remember Jonestown.
It was sad.
It's kind of strange.
Oh, that's where that term "don't drink the Kool-Aid" came from, right?
Don't drink the
Okay.
Kool-Aid, yeah, because he mixed the poison in the Kool-Aid. David Koresh was another one. He was at Waco. He was, what was it? Branch Davidians. They were Branch Davidians. The Branch Davidians have come up again. Not David Koresh, of course. He died back in 90 whatever. But the Branch Davidians have come up again because if you remember where the American Indian elder was playing the drum and the kids from Covington, Kentucky were standing there and disrespecting him. There was a reason why the kids were standing there, and there was a reason why the elder was playing the drum. The elder was playing the drum for another reason, but the kids were listening to a group of Branch Davidians, a group of individuals from, not really from this group, but it was a group that supports Sabbath on Saturdays and whatnot. It's a really kind of an interesting idea. Sun Myung Moon, he's a Korean leader I can't. It's in there. I will talk about Sun Myung Moon, and then of course Marshall Applewhite with his group and the Comet. So if I can get this thing to work, let's see if this will. Zoltan.
It is now my great pleasure to present to you our wise and
Yeah, exactly.
Zoltan. Zoltan.
Oh, there he is. Boba Fett. You've never seen this movie?
No.
It's a wonderful movie.
We are finally going to fulfill our prophecy of outer space travel. They laughed at us when we said that aliens existed, and they mocked us when we started wearing bubble wrap jumpsuits. But who's laughing now, huh? I'll tell you who's laughing now. We are! Soon we will leave this lame planet and fly through outer space with cool aliens who like us. It is going to be awesome! Zoltan! That's them! They knocked us out and stole our spacesuits! No, we didn't. Yeah, you did. No, we didn't. Yes, you did. No, we didn't. Yes, you did. Hey, we could be us or them.
Zoltan. Cults. Okay.
Dude, where's my car? I used to love watching that movie.
Well, they saved the world from the
Giant movie.
giant. Well, the lady with the giant lady, yeah, the 50-foot woman. Jim Jones and his People's Temple, of course. Jim Jones is actually from my hometown. I know, it's quite an honor. David Koresh and the Branch Davidians, of course. That's David Koresh. He got in trouble a couple different ways. One, he theoretically he was having sex with the underage girls. The other thing that was going on was he was massing arms and ammunition. It was okay to mass arms and ammunition as long as they're legal arms and ammunition, but he was massing illegal arms, sawed-off shotguns, I think was what he got in trouble for. So they tried to go in and take the weapons away from him and the place blew up, killing almost everybody inside. All the women and children and all of the Branch Davidians. Sun Myung Moon in the Unification Church, kind of an interesting fellow. He claimed he has since died, but while he was alive, of course, he was a huge church, making billions of dollars every year. But he claimed that he was able to communicate with God, or with Jesus, I guess was his thing. And Jesus would speak through him, which was always kind of exciting. And his big thing was mass weddings. So, yeah, which was always kind of interesting, because you didn't go there with a boyfriend or a girlfriend. You went there all by yourself, and they matched you up. How did they match you up? Well, he's the one that did it, because God was telling him who to match people up with. So as you can see, this is everybody's got wedding clothes on. This is a mass wedding in Korea. Korea, oddly, interestingly, Korea is primarily Christian, which is kind of curious because it's an Asian country. Most Asian countries are Buddhist of one ilk or another, but Korea is primarily Christian. And the Unification Church is huge over there. Even today, it's huge. Even though he has died, I think his wife has died too. When he married his wife, theoretically, she got the ability to match people up, to speak through God, which is always exciting. Anyway, and Marshall Applewhite and Heaven's Gate. We've already talked about these guys. I think we did. I think it was in here we talked about it. Anyway, they all committed suicide so that they could jump on the meteor. There was a spaceship behind the meteor, an alien spaceship. Everybody knows that. Anyway, cults. These were cults. And what they do is they get somebody that is not happy in their lives, somebody who's a bit of an introvert, and these individuals are able to convince those individuals that they need to join their group. And of course, one of the ways that they do it is isolation. They embarrass and insult them so that they will only believe the word of the leader, whoever the leader may happen to be. And that's the way it works. Attitudes follow behavior. New initiates into a cult are made to live a rigid ritualistic existence that not only controls their behavior, but through their activities makes them an important full-fledged member of the cult community. This strengthens the individual's membership in the cult, and they become more likely to change their attitude. The greater the personal commitment, the more the need to justify it. Attitude follows behavior, and this is the way it works. As curious as all of this is. Now, the strange thing about the whole concept of cults is that you can make just about anything a cult. Anything will fit this. Teaching at Dene College, this could be a cult situation where I'm trying to be part of the group, so they're telling me what to do, and so I'm doing whatever I'm told to do, and they're able to control me through their positive thoughts or their negative ideas. So it could become a cult situation. And just about anything can become a cult situation, including a legitimate religion. Of course, people can adhere to that idea to a maximum extent, and it becomes a cult situation. Can become a cult situation. Often, an astute cult leader will use the foot in the door technique to recruit people to become part of the group. He will make only a simple request in the beginning that the individual will have a hard time denying. This is my favorite, that somebody will come to the door and they'll ask me for gas money, they say, you know, I need $100, and I'm going, no, I can't do that. Well, how about 20? No, I'm not gonna give you $20. Well, how about all the change in your pocket? What they're doing is it's the foot in the door technique. The idea is that I will give them a small amount of money. So the next time they come, of course, and they ask for all the change in my pocket. Right now I've got about $15 in quarters in my pocket. Next time they'll ask for another $20. And I'll probably give it to them. This has happened to me over and over again since I've been here. I had this one guy that every time he came to my door, he was looking for diapers for his little girl. His wife was a drinker, and she keeps drinking up the diaper money. So, hi, Dee. I know, I'm an easy touch. By gradually increasing the demands, they don't seem to be too oppressive. Though to look at the situation from the beginning, they tend to have given up quite a bit. So they slowly draw you into giving them more and more and more money. Or in this case, they're drawing you in to control you more. The communicator is usually an attractive, charismatic leader, as we saw with Sun Myung Moon, David Koresh, Jim Jones, and Marshall Applewhite. They were fairly attractive, charismatic leaders. Trust is established by having much of the recruiting being done by friends or relatives. And of course, it's kind of hard to argue with your relatives. Not me, of course, but you guys have a hard time arguing with your relatives. Middle-class white kids are the easiest to recruit because they tend to be more trusting. White people are really gullible. You guys probably haven't recognized that yet, but if you ever go out into the white community, they're probably the most gullible people around. They believe everything. If it's on the internet, it's true. Lower class kids have too much street smarts to go for the obvious hustle. Upper class kids have been trained from birth to be wary of the scam. So it's the middle class kids. It's the kids with not a whole lot of money. These are the individuals that are the easiest to recruit to a cult. Everybody else is too smart. These kids are pretty stupid. For the lonely or the chronically rejected, a message of warmth and acceptance is very appealing. The message tends to be repeated in different forums, from one-on-one discussions to small group meetings to large lectures. The message is always the same. Trust the master, join the family, the master has the answer. Yes, sir?
Have you ever seen any cults on the reservations you've worked on?
Let me think.
Or have you ever seen any cults before? Have you been around any?
No, well, gangs are cultish. But I've never seen any cult that actually worked on the reservation. But then again, I've only been here for 3 years. I could imagine, you guys live away from each other. If you go to other reservations, everybody lives on top of each other. You know, they have little hut. Well, it's like Navajo. That's, you know, if you go drive through Navajo, all the houses are really close together. Well, that's the way it is on almost all the reservations. They have little communities. People don't live out, everybody lives together. But in the old days, of course, pre-Columbian, everybody lived together for protection. And of course, it's just the word. You know, when you went out buffalo hunting, everybody lived in the same village. But of course, you guys are a little bit different.
They had a cult in Belcom last year.
Is that right? Was it a religious cult?
Yeah.
A Christian religious cult?
It was a mix of different things. I think it was Summer Moon or I can't remember something.
Sun Myung Moon?
Something in there.
Is that right? Unification Church?
And,
Yeah, it's cool.
they tried to ask them. I guess one of the cult members was a man
Or just
who
one?
got involved in it when they were out off the reservation somewhere, so they decided to invite them over. The whole cult showed up.
I wouldn't think you guys would be that dull. I'm sorry. That's a white kids. Middle class white kids are the ones that are the most dull.
It took them a while to get them to leave.
I can understand that. Trust the master, join the family, master has the answer. There you go. I'm trying to create a cult here with the, no, just kidding. I have the answer. Recruits are often young, under the age of 25, before their attitudes and values stabilize. They may be less educated and unable to counter-argue the simple message. Most turn out to be educated, middle-aged individuals at a turning point in their lives, facing a personal crisis, living away from home, looking for an escape. Usually the escape is from their parents. They've been living with their parents all their lives, and they've been trying to, they're looking for a way to get out. A lot of individuals will marry out of their birth family. They'll marry anybody. They'll marry anybody that comes along. And of course, this is kind of a sad situation, but I know that's my first wife.
I was just thinking about
How many times?
They marry anybody to get out of the barracks.
Exactly, yeah, to get out of your house. I'm afraid I did that with my current wife. She joined the military to get away from her family, which makes a lot of sense.
I went to a church service with a cult once at Fort Lewis, Washington,
Uh-huh,
where all the new soldiers coming in.
uh-huh.
They spend about a week getting their paperwork in order and everything, their uniforms, before they get shipped out to whatever unit they're from.
Sure.
And our first evening there, these two guys came up. They were soldiers too. And they're like, "Hey, have you guys eaten dinner yet?" We're like, "No, we missed dinner because we're doing our paperwork." They're like, "Well, our church is having dinner. You know, if you guys want to come over, we'll give you a meal." And we're like, "Yeah, sure." You know, we went over with them, and man, it was something else. There was like the four of us that went over to get something to eat.
Sure.
It was, everything seemed normal for about 15 minutes, and then it just progressively got odder and odder and odder. By the time they served dinner, we were like, "Man, we just want to go."
Let us go. Salvation Army will pull the same stunt. You know, you go in there for a meal and all of a sudden they start preaching to you. So, Salvation Army. If you've ever been to Salvation Army. Okay. Yeah, I know. They gotcha.
And they wouldn't let us leave. We didn't leave till about 11 o'clock at night, and we met them about like 4 in the evening.
They had you.
Yeah, we were talking amongst ourselves like, all right, we might have to make a run for it if they don't let us out of here pretty soon.
Well, that's what I was saying. Some legitimate religions are very cultish. How about that? We can say that. And they act that way. Church of the Nazarene will do that. Well, do you know what the denomination was?
No, I'll ask around, but when we got back to the barracks, the next day they gave us a safety brief. They're like, "Watch out for these guys, they're gonna come down." And we were like, "They got us yesterday." They're like, "Oh, we should have told you yesterday. We didn't think they were gonna move in that fast." But they're aware of when new people come in.
Sure.
They're always, they have it locked down. They even go to the bus stations out in town. We got a briefing about them. They were really, they try to get them, people that are new to the area that
Sure.
haven't found out about the fight yet, how aggressive they are.
That's the way it works. When we're in when there's some kind of a social upheaval going on, cults are more likely. This is the time when they spring up all over the place. During the recession, there were a lot of cults came out. Anyway, group effects. The cult typically separates members from their previous social support systems and isolate them from other cultists. This creates a phenomenon known as social implosion, where the members only socialize with other members. They're not allowed to contact friends or family. Sometimes when a woman marries a select individual, he'll try to isolate her from her family so that he can control her. This is relatively common. I know he's creating a cult unto themselves. They are cut off from their family and friends, and that way they can't counter-argue. The group defines reality and offers identity. The cult may punish wrong thinking and supports consensus. This was done during World War II. The Nazis did this during World War II. If you've read about the Japanese and how the Japanese, the military cult that was taking place in in Japan prior to World War II. They were pulling the same stunts over in Japan. The Japanese are very collectivistic. It's a very collectivistic country. You don't want to stand out in Japan. So it's very cultish, cult-like. And we see this in the military. Some guys who go over to Japan, and all of a sudden they start wearing kimonos and wearing those really strange wooden sandal things. Weird. Yeah.
The other thing I noticed about that cult that I had a brush with was they took the soldiers' money. They had a little dorm set up with a bunch of bunks. And the people that were in the military had to stay there. They couldn't stay at their barracks, and they had to forfeit their pay to the cult. That was another weird thing.
It's not that weird.
They were trying to sell us on the idea of
Giving all your money to the cult?
No, I'm good. I don't get that much anyways. I can give it away.
Well, most religions will, Christian religions make you tithe. Tithing means 1/10 is what tithing means. So you give 1/10 of your income to the church. So that's very relatively common. Other churches will make you give anything that you possibly can, above and beyond the 10% of your pay, which is kind of interesting. Money. It always has to do with money. One problem with arguing against a point of view is that the argument isn't strong. If the argument isn't strong enough, it merely polarizes people against the argument. The individual builds resistance to further arguments. This is referred to as attitude inoculation, and we see this a lot on Fox News. We see this on CNN or MSNBC. If you watch one of those television shows, a lot of times they will have somebody from the other side talking, and usually they will only allow them to talk a small amount, and because of that, you're able to counter argue with that select individual. If it's a liberal point of view, of course, then the conservative point of view is not a very strong one, and there's a lot more counter arguing taking place against the individual that's trying to make their point. And they do this on all the opinion shows, both on CNN and Fox News. A lot of times on Fox News, they don't have a different idea. They just tell you what the other side is saying, and then they tell you why it's wrong, which is kind of interesting. Anyway, attitude inoculation. So if you read select websites, political websites like Breitbart or what is that? Patriots something or other. I don't know. I kept getting information about this during the last election. Anyway, attitude inoculation. This is where you're prepared for stronger attacks, because weak arguments prepare you to counter argue, and that is all about that. Okay, we're going to talk about conformity in the next chapter. I know I'm just zipping right along. This is chapter 8. You have a paper due next week. You can write it about anything. I am very forgiving as far as turning things in late. Just don't turn it in May, because, damn it, I don't want to be reading 80 papers in May. And I have to turn in the grades. So get them in sometime next month.
Can you go over the paper a little bit?
Sure. The paper is a 5-page paper, 5 pages of text. That doesn't include the introduction page or the bibliography. 5 pages of text. I count lines. There's 23 lines per page for 115 lines. Okay. So if you have less than 115 lines, then it's not long enough. But I'm not going to automatically give you a bad grade just because you don't have a long enough paper. I will take points off for not being long enough. 5 pages, 5 references. Easy stuff. Okay, so if you're writing about conformity, you're writing about cults, Find 5 references, find 5 articles that deal with that, so that you can talk about it. Johnson and Johnson said that this and this and this and this. 5 references.
So anything, basically anything that's in the book.
Anything that's in the book is fair game.
Okay. Does that also go for animal psychology?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the book, it's good, you're good to go.
Okay.
Normally what people will do in abnormal psychology is they will select a mental illness to talk about,
Okay.
like their favorite one, or their least favorite. I don't know how this stuff works.
What day is it?
What's that?
What day is it?
What day is it due? It's due Monday.
Monday?
Sure.
Oh, excuse me.
You're okay.
I got real bad allergies right now.
Is that right?
Yeah. I was puffing up really.
Man's been all over the world. He's got allergies to his home.
I used to never have allergies, so I went to Iraq. I came back and my eyes were real puffy this morning. I took a Benadryl. I sat down on my couch for a little while and I woke up and was like, oh, I gotta go to class.
I've been a drill head.
So as long as it's in within the next month, just not May.
Yeah, just get it in. I have to put a date on it, otherwise you guys will wait until the last day. And I'll literally be reading 80 papers. You know, it takes me a while because I'm an old English teacher, so I correct everything. I correct your grammar, I correct your word usage. I don't correct your ideas. No matter what ideas you have, I never tell you that your ideas are correct or incorrect, but I will correct your language. So if you use the wrong word, one of the things that happens here, and I haven't figured this out yet, but one of the things that happens here is you guys use the wrong prepositions for a select verb. Each verb has a preposition that goes with it.
An example.
It's hard for me to come up with an example. I was thinking of the word run. See, run you can use just about any preposition. Run up, run on, run around, run under. So that's a verb that has that you can use any preposition with. But geez, I can't even come up with one off the top of my head.
I have.
You got one?
No, I have a horrible time with prepositions. I struggle with that really, really bad.
The more you read, the more you realize that verbs and prepositions go together. And that you can't use select prepositions with select words. Don't worry about it, just write
Right, no, I'm gonna.
write
put that
whatever you want,
preposition
and I will
because
correct it.
I'll be honest, I
A
don't know.
preposition, on, under, around, to, with, those are all prepositions.
Okay, I get what you're
It
saying.
joins a noun and a verb.
So like T-O and then T-O-O.
Mhm.
So, okay,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah, T-O is a preposition.
Mhm.
T-O-O is,
Okay.
it's an expository word.
Expository.
I know.
I also struggle with there and your.
Wait,
That's okay, everybody does.
your Y-O-U'-R-E is you-are,
You are.
then your Y-O-U-R is like yours.
Possessive.
Yours.
What? Exactly, possessive. Very good. Okay.
College.
Don't worry about it. If you make a mistake, I will correct it. And I usually, I don't take very many points off for grammar, unless it's really, really bad.
Well, I know that like I had a problem with commas like in school. I would just like, let's just put a comma here and there and like, let's take a break.
See, I wouldn't take
So-
off points.
It's like, yeah.
I have people putting words together that don't even, or no sentences. You know, a sentence has to have a verb, it has to have a noun, and usually it has, you know, object of preposition. But, you know, it has an object, but they won't have a verb, or they won't have a noun, or they will have
That's not even a sentence. How is it?
I always, my biggest mistake is always run-on sentences.
And yeah, and I'm a, okay. The English teachers teach you to write long sentences and put a lot of commas in. What I will do is I will break those sentences up.
Yeah.
I'm a Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway wrote short, exact sentences, and that's the reality. So I won't let you have a run-on sentence. I will put period in there. I won't take room.
Even like when we're down, we can just give it to Deborah Robinson and she can edit it. Then we can
Deborah Robinson speaks in run-on sentences.
Okay, never mind.
I've had a lot of conversations with Debbie, and Debbie is a journalist. And journalists, a lot of times, they are trying to make a point. So they won't ever put a period in. They just keep putting commas in.
If I'm short on words, then I'll go back and reread, and I'll try to draw out sentences.
That's not good.
That's where I get in trouble, because then I've added so many other words, it doesn't flow anymore. It doesn't make sense.
Your segues are all messed up.
Dr. Ami calls that fluff. She
Fluff.
goes, don't fluff it up or else I'm not going to accept it. So we can't do that in our class. It's scary.
I think that's wonderful. Well, anyway, use APA. Use APA.
Story for another day.
Use the APA format rather than the MLA format. Now you may ask yourself, why in the world did they teach me MLA if MLA, I will never use MLA again?
Yeah.
And the answer is because I can't get them to stop. They should be teaching something that you might use. MLA is only used in literature. It's only used in English. Nobody else uses it. But that's what they teach because that's what they learn.
It's like math.
You're going to learn it once and never use it again.
I'm just like, I don't understand why I have to be lost.
Liberal arts. Conformity. Conformity is a change in behavior or belief as a result of real or imagined group pressure. Lots of group pressure. Wilson is telling you how to act as a Navajo. He's trying to make you conform. Not that it's his fault. Avery, not so much. But Wilson, he wants you guys to act like all the same. Anyway, conformity tends to occur even in large groups. We do conform if you go to a select church. They want everybody to act exactly the same. They want you to wear the right clothes. Once upon a time in a land far, far away, Indiana, my mother went to a meeting. She was a member of the Methodist Church. She went to a meeting. She'd been working out in the yard, and she was pulling weeds, and she forgot all about the meeting, and she jumped in the car, ran over to the meeting, and she was wearing shorts, and she was wearing she had work gloves. Of course, she took the gloves off, but she was wearing shorts. And when she went into the meeting, the minister who was running the meeting got mad at her and told her that she needed to dress more appropriately if she was going to go to church. And my mother called him a stuck-up son of a bitch, and that was the last time we ever went to church. Because he was trying to make my mother conform, and my mother is not a conformist, I guess. Everybody else, of course, was dressed the way they were supposed to be dressed, with a dress on and wearing gloves. Back in the 1950s, everybody wore gloves, and they got all dolled up in order to go to this committee meeting. And my mother thought it was stupid, and she said, "You son of a bitch! I'll never step foot in your church again." Anyway, she called him all kinds of flavors of sons of bitches. So, and of course, we were out in the car, and I was only like 2 or 3 years old. But we were very much aware when my mother was mad, and my mother came out of the church mad. So we were all scared that something was going to happen. She wasn't mad at us, of course, she was mad at the preacher. And she never went back to church. He was trying to create his own cult. Is conformity good or bad? Now, that's the question. I mean, if we all need to act a certain way when we're in a select culture. Is this good or is this bad? In the military culture, you act a select way. When you're down in Chinle, you act a certain way. When you go to Gallup, you potentially act a different way. When you go down to Phoenix, you probably act a different way. I used to play soccer with a group of guys from Saudi Arabia. When they were in Saudi Arabia, they wore their kaftans and they didn't drink. In the United States, these guys were wild men. And the reason was because in our culture, they act one way. In their own culture, they acted a totally different way. They couldn't drink over there. They couldn't go out with wild women. But over here, of course, they did whatever the hell they wanted to do because they weren't in their own culture. So is conformity good or bad?
I think it's good. Because,
Oh, do I have on the wrong color coat on?
I'd say,
Do I need a hat like yours?
let's take traditional people, for example.
Sure,
And also the modern people that believe in the
sure,
church.
right,
Non-believers of the traditional ways.
right.
And you have two different people. And the non-traditional person were to go around and hang out with traditional people. Traditional people would think that that person didn't know anything, and they would want to pay attention to them because they have this idea of knowing everything it is to be navigable.
Right.
And from the past perspective of history of where culture and tradition comes from, they would think that automatically. So that would make this person that's non-traditional feel like they're lost, they're out of place. No matter what they do to try to fit in, they're not going to fit in.
Not with traditional, not with the traditional culture.
Not with traditional culture. And then they would do their best all the way until they prove that they're actually capable of learning traditional ways.
So they have to conform.
Exactly, they have to conform.
They have to conform.
If not, then, there's always going to be judgment.
In order to be part of that group, they have to conform. And it's that way with just about everything. If you want to go to a select church, you better wear the right clothes when you go to church. You better not wear your flip-flops at church. Because nobody else wears flip-flops, everybody else wears flip-flops. But the question, and the other question is, can you be a part of this group without conforming? That's the other question.
Yeah.
Can you be traditional and not wear, and not act, or wear clothes that other people see as traditional? That's the other question. Yes, sir.
Question about conformity. What if you're, is it, I don't know if it's just another word for conformity, but under the form of just observing certain rules or restrictions, if you're not necessarily conforming, but you're just being aware of it and observing it, like, when I was, like, for example, when I was in Iraq, I didn't convert to Muslim. I wasn't from the area, but I observed a lot of the cultural
Sure.
do's and don'ts, so that just to show that I was a little bit sensitive, good faith.
Were they trying to convert you?
No.
I didn't think so.
Yeah, so I did it out of respect for the place I was at,
Right.
and I observed a lot of the rules, and I didn't have really a problem with it. None of them violated my conscience.
Right.
If you're doing something like that, is that considered conformity as well?
No. No, you're just trying to get along with everybody, and that's okay. Respecting other people's culture is not conforming. I mean, rejecting other people's culture because your culture tells you you have to reject their culture, that's conforming. Yeah, it gets really strange. Especially if you're military. My goodness, how many places did you live? You lived in Washington State?
Well, even in the military, I was in the infantry,
Sure.
I was in the Rangers, I worked in support units,
Right,
I was in the National Guard,
right.
and the culture totally shifted with the different groups I went to.
Right.
I had to be flexible. I had still my own
Sure.
ideas as an individual and as a soldier.
Right.
But I had to really be malleable, I had to really be flexible no matter where I went to be successful. So I found, I don't know if it's conformity, but it's, I guess I look at it as being necessary sometimes.
Yeah, I wouldn't call that conformity. Everybody has to, you have to be able to get along with other individuals. One of the things that happened in the 70s when I was in the military was that civil rights was taking place. So you get guys from the South who hated black people for no reason whatsoever, but they couldn't act that way. They had to follow orders, which in the orders were you had to get along with everybody, but they had to conform. And a lot of those individuals changed their minds because they'd never actually been around black people. They never actually interacted with them. They'd been around them, but they never really interacted with them. They had all these stereotypes about them. So they had to conform. These individuals potentially changed their minds, but
So is conformity more or less resetting your own,
yeah.
taking it on?
Yeah, you're resetting your personality. That's what conforming is. It's changing your personality so that you'll fit in.
Or you don't have to.
I'm sorry?
Or you don't have to.
Well, yeah, no, of course you don't have to. But at the same time, you may be rejected.
I think conformity can be good and bad,
Sure.
but it's really up to the decision you make about it.
Right.
If you want to adjust it now.
And I had to decide how I was going to act, because my first duty station was in Texas. Well, Texans wear cowboy boots, they wear hats, and they wear really tight jeans, and they talk funny and spit a lot. They did snuff. Should I have tried to conform? Should I have tried to get along? Should I have changed my accent? Texans speak with a very specific accent. So should I have done that? Or should I have kept my Hoosier accent? That's a question. That's a question you have to ask yourself.
Maybe there's like different levels of conformity, like where you have to conform, not to step on any toes, like being
Right.
a chameleon.
Sure.
Or like you're forced into it and then you really don't have a choice. So maybe there's like
Right.
two.
Yeah. But of course, nobody's going to force me to wear cowboy boots. Or put on that damn hat. Or wear tight jeans. I guess they could try. But that would have been conformity. And I have known soldiers that when they went to Japan, they started acting Japanese. When they lived in Texas, they started acting like Texans. When they lived in Mississippi, they were just as racist as all the other crazy white people in Mississippi. So these individuals conformed to whatever the environment was. And that's conformity. Just trying to get along, I don't know, eating barbecue in Mississippi. Their barbecue isn't that good. Texas barbecue is really pretty good, but not so much in Mississippi. It's bad when it leads to incorrect behavior such as drinking and driving or doing drugs because everyone else is doing it. And of course, this is what we see with adolescents a lot. Adolescents want to be just like everybody else in the group. So if everybody else is drinking, they want to drink. As a matter of fact, being a psychologist, I see drinking alcoholic beverages as an adolescent thing to do. Why in the world would you do it? It's not really an adult thing, it's an adolescent thing. People drink more when they're adolescents than they do when they're older. Isn't this confusing? They drink more when it's illegal for them to drink than they do when it's legal for them to drink. Think of your friends. Think of all the people that had automobile accidents, as strange as that may seem. So it seems like an adolescent thing to me. It's a very adolescent thing. It's a very immature thing to do. It's not a very smart thing to do, obviously. Like smoking, it's not a very smart thing to do. So it seems very adolescent to me. It's good when it maintains necessary social organization, such as waiting your turn in a grocery store, checkout line. Sometimes, of course, it's inconsequential. Whether I wear cowboy boots or whether I wear running shoes really doesn't make that much difference. It isn't going to change one thing or another. And I don't know how you guys can wear cowboy boots and walk around, especially if it's slick outside. Your bottom of your boots are slick.
You get used to it.
Yeah, see, you have to get used to it. When I went to college, I was only 17 years old. I went to a beer bash. I know I wasn't supposed to be drinking. Legal drinking age in my state was 21, and here I was 17 years old. This guy gave me a glass of beer. And I swallowed it, and I said, oh God, this stuff tastes like shit. I actually used the S word. And the guy said, you'll get used to it. Yet you have to develop a taste for it. I was thinking, why? To develop a taste for this stuff. Now the interesting thing is, the guy that I was with is now a beer connoisseur. We both hated that shit, but now he drinks, he goes around the world drinking the beer from Aruba, the beer from Belgium, and the beer from Spain. Who would have thought? He developed a taste for beer. He did it, and I didn't. He conformed, and I didn't conform. He also joined the fraternity, and I didn't. And so he had to conform to that mindset. In Western cultures, conformity is considered to be negative. It shows submission and compliance. In Eastern cultures, of course, conformity is seen as a positive thing: communal sensitivity, responsiveness, cooperative team play. When you're in Japan, when you're in China, when you're in Korea, when you're in Vietnam, people act the same, and you expect everybody to act the same, because it's a collectivist society. And conformity is a positive thing as far as they're concerned. Two types of conformity are compliance and acceptance. Compliance is conformity that involves publicly acting in accord with social pressure while privately disagreeing. We see this a lot in the military. Somebody gives you an order, you don't like it, you do it, but you don't like it, and you really don't agree with it. This happened to my brother during Vietnam. They were clearing Highway 1. There was only one highway in Vietnam. I told this story last night to a friend of mine. They were clearing Highway 1, and he was a combat engineer, so they were clearing the highway, and when they got to a side road, they had to clear the side road as well. But they had been told that there were Viet Cong down on this road. So the lieutenant that was in charge told them, well, let's go. And he wanted to march right down the middle of the road. And my brother, who was a sergeant at the time, he wasn't a commanding sergeant, but he was a secondary sergeant. He said, no, I don't think we should do that. I mean, if we know that there are Viet Cong down there, they're going to ambush us. And the guy said, well, we've got this huge unit and we can handle it. The lieutenant was saying this, and my brother said, no, that's not going to work at all. And he said, well, I order you to go down the road. So they took off, and my brother took a group of about 6 guys, and they went through the jungle, and they ambushed the ambush. And so, they ambushed the ambush.
They flanked them.
Did they fight them?
Flank.
Oh, flank them. Yeah, they
They were on
flanked
their
them.
side.
Yeah, they flanked them. They flanked the ambush. And in essence, he saved lots of guys' lives, but of course he didn't follow orders. So he got in trouble. The guy wrote him up for not obeying orders because he didn't do what he told him to do. So when they went back to camp that night, well, the rest of it's kind of an ugly story. They didn't frag the guy, but he broke his leg in the shower. The lieutenant broke his leg in the shower.
What?
Because he was stupid, that's why.
You don't have to lift the weight.
He should have learned, but he didn't want to listen. He was at West Point. And during Vietnam, they used to send the Army did anyway. They would send their officers into combat for 6 months, and then they would go back to headquarters for 6 months. So they didn't get a chance to really be out in the field and understand what was going on. So my brother didn't follow orders. He saved everybody's lives. He saved some people's lives, but he didn't follow orders. So he didn't comply, and so he got in trouble for not complying. But don't worry, he didn't get written up. The lieutenant broke his leg before he could write him up. Anyway, so that's compliance. Obedience is acting in accord with a direct order, and that's what my brother didn't do. He was not obedient. Acceptance is conformity that involves both acting and believing in accord with social pressure. We got something going on in the United States right now. The president has decided he wants to build a wall along the southern border with Mexico. He wrote an executive order, and the Congress didn't like it. Congress voted against it. They didn't have the votes to override his veto. So, and this happened yesterday, actually. So one of the things that's happening is that they're going to build that wall, or some portion of that wall, despite what Congress said. So the question is, will people accept this? Of course we're going to do it. We're going to comply. We're going to obey the orders because we have no choice. But the question is, will we accept it? That's the question. And that's what's going on right now. In the middle of the 1930s, Muzaffar Sharif he's Egyptian by the way, conducted the first psychological studies in conformity at Columbia University. Sharif had 3 people make speculations about the movement of a light in a darkened room. The next day, the 3 were put in the same room. By the end of the day, though their initial estimates were very different, they all agreed to a group norm. In other words, when people tell you something, sometimes you conform to their way of thinking. And of course, this is what politicians are hoping will happen. All they have to do is tell us what to do. Eventually, we forget that we didn't agree in the beginning, and we see all these people that agree with that point of view. So we conform, and we will accept their way of thinking.
Would that be considered a social influence?
Yes. Yeah. Group behavior. Social control. Robert Jacobs and Donald Campbell from Northwestern University repeated the experiment but used a confederate to overestimate the movement of the light. The reality is that this is known as the autokinetic phenomenon. If you're standing there and there's a stationary light, your body is moving, especially in the dark. Your body is moving, so it looks like that light is moving. Try it sometime. You can do it with stars in the sky. You look at a star and you think, oh, that's an airplane. Oh, look at it moving. Well, the reality is you're the one that's moving. The star's just sitting there. And this is known as autokinetic phenomenon. This is a really serious problem if we're dealing with a military situation, because if you're out someplace at night and you're looking for the enemy, a lot of times what you think that you may see movement out in the periphery, out on the horizon, and the reality is it's your body moving back and forth. So you may, oh my goodness, there's movement out there. So you call up all the troops and everybody gets their gun all ready to shoot something, and actually it's just a sand dune, or whatever. And your body is actually moving, and you think that the sand dune is moving. It's a troop movement or whatever. And this is known as the autokinetic phenomena.
Or your eyeballs, I think
Yeah.
the liquid kind of moves around like that.
Well, it's called a saccade. Your eyes will move anyway. Like if I look at your face, my eyes are theoretically are just looking at your face, at one portion of your face, but the reality is it's looking at all aspects of your face. So it's bouncing all over. That's the way it works. You think you're just looking at somebody's eyes, but the reality is you're also looking at their chin, you're looking at their nose, you're looking at their mouth, you're looking at their forehead, you're looking at everything. It's because your eyes are bouncing around, are jumping around. You can concentrate on one thing, but the reality is I see, not only do I see my container here, but I see everybody. I can see everybody in the room. And so my eyes are moving around. It's called a saccade. And we do it naturally. Our eyes are constantly moving. If you've ever been around somebody that can't control their eyes, a lot of times you'll see them just bouncing all over the place. If somebody gets sick, if you have inner ear infection, a lot of times what will happen is your body is constantly, your eyes are constantly moving, and you'll be tracking something that's not, a movement that's not actually there. And you'll see their eyes just flipping back and forth.
Can that
Vertigo?
happen with people that are like having like drugs or alcohol?
Yes. Yeah, you'll look at their eyes and they're just flipping from side to
And
side.
what is that called? Why does that happen?
Why does it happen? There is a medical term, and I'm not exactly sure what it is. But the reason it's happening is because they at that point, they don't have control over their eye movement. Same thing happens when you have inner ear infection. Because one side is, normally, both sides of your head are the same temperature. But if you have an inner ear infection on one side, it's hotter over here than it is over here. And for that reason, your eyes are trying to find a steady point, and it can't because there's more heat over here than there is over here. So your eyes will start flipping from side to side. It's like, of course, none of you have ever been drunk before, but if you get drunk, sometimes it feels like the bed's spinning around. You guys never.
No,
They,
never.
they use this to identify TBI as well.
Yeah, right.
When I came back from Iraq, I didn't know I had a TBI. And I was complaining about being dizzy.
Right.
And they sent me to the neurologist. The neurologist said, there's nothing wrong with you. But it was the ear, nose, and throat doctor said there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And she was the one that was able to, she put me in this dark room and they turned on some kind of light. I couldn't see it, but she said your eyes aren't acting the way they're supposed
Right.
to act. And then they took me to this room where there was a light board,
Mhm.
and the light was moving like this.
Oh, no.
You get
Check
motion
my vertigo.
sickness. Vertigo, exactly. You get motion sickness. You're sitting in one place and you're sick, like the whole world is, you can see the whole world moving. It's just the most bizarre thing in the whole
It
world.
happens to me sometimes. Like, I'll be sitting down, even if I'm sitting down, I'll feel like I'm leaning this way. So I'll
Right.
compensate by moving over this way.
Right.
And I feel like I'm still leaning this way, so I'll keep compensating, moving this way.
Until you fall over.
Then when I hit the ground, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm having a vertigo attack.
Vertigo, a lot of times vertigo is caused by, you've got these little bones in your ears, and they have to sit in a certain position. Well, if they get out of position, sometimes you get vertigo like that. And one of the things that you can do is try to reposition those bones in your ears, and there's a way to do it. I can give you the technique. Have I ever told you this before?
A lot of times they tell me to just lay down
Yeah,
on my right side.
exactly.
They said there's some, I think they call it crystals or something.
Right,
some type.
exactly. Lay down flat. Turn your head as far to one side as you possibly can, and hold it there for an extended amount of time, as long as you possibly can. That will reposition those crystals in your ears.
I was actually told to place lantern downward, to head back, do that, slowly move this way like this.
Oh, is that right?
All of it, because it's like two conforming to your ears.
Right.
A tube like that, and the crystals that are in here have to get to one side. So slowly, it's kind of like weird, like shaped like this, it goes like this, it goes back like
Now,
this.
isn't that interesting? All three of us have been told different things in order to get our crystals to stabilize. Did it work?
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
so
it
that
took
worked
like-
for
It
you.
took like a week to actually.
Okay. Mine worked for me, and evidently Emery's hasn't worked for you.
I
No,
know that
what-
there's
what-
some people that get their ears pierced right here. That's supposed to help with vertigo. I don't know how to do it.
What works for me is
would?
yawning. If I can yawn,
Oh, okay.
because like right now my ears are plugged, I can't hear out of this side. Right now.
So it pops your ear.
It comes and goes,
Mhm.
and when I'm like this, I'm more susceptible to vertigo attacks. So I always try to yawn, so if I can't yawn, I'll go up. I'll try to like go up on top of a mountain,
Mhm.
or come back down. I'll drive back and forth and try to get my ear to pop.
Does that work?
Yeah, because I figured that out going to Phoenix. Driving down to Phoenix one time, my ear popped. I was yawning and yawning, and only one side popped and the other side, this side wouldn't. And finally, I was in Phoenix, and I finally yawned real hard. And my ear popped, and everything went back to normal.
Flight crews can stabilize their ears. Not, well, you can do it with, yeah, exactly.
I do that, I've been doing that all morning.
Is that right, trying to pop your ear?
It works some.
Yeah, they taught us that when I was in the service. Especially if you make an emergency dive, you've got to pop your ear.
That's actually where I learned it, was in the dive school. Because we're getting the bends. We also have to
Well, we're
deal
talking
with-
about in the air, I'm not talking about the
Yeah, we
water.
have to deal with the oxygenation of
Right.
the blood.
Okay, so conformity is very strong, and this is really quite important. Other researchers have done work with suggestibility. Peter Totterdell has identified a phenomenon referred to as mood linkage, where people who work together tend to reflect each other's moods. Tanya Chartrand and John Bard conducted experiments where they had a confederate making a select gesture, such as nose rubbing or foot bouncing. The subject tended to copy the confederate's movement in a response they referred to as the chameleon effect. And this is the way this really works. The other day, who was I talking? Oh, Marius. I was talking to Marius. He's got a whole classroom full of people, and he had this one hair that was tickling his nose, and he kept picking his nose. And he'd look out, and all of his students were picking their nose, like there was something, like everybody had boogers or something. I don't know. It was really weird. This is known as the chameleon effect. If I do something, well, not if I do something, but if you see somebody else doing something in the class, potentially you'll do the same thing.
Is that like yawning? Like one person yawns
Well,
and then-
yawning is kind of a different phenomenon, because if I yawn, it makes you feel like you have to yawn. But if I'm standing there with my, with my hands, with my arms crossed, all of a sudden you're standing there with your arms crossed. We're mirroring each other. We're mimicking one another. As curious as that is. And this is known as the chameleon effect. Huh?
I've actually seen that a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen that a lot.
You can mess with people.
Yeah, especially
If you're mean, you can mess with people.
Is that like the same thing with like attitudes? Cause like, if I'm trying to be nice to somebody, but they're really B-word, then I do the same
B-word.
thing. I don't want to cuss in here.
Words bitch, you're.
Well, if they're acting like that, then like I change my attitude to like fit that, cause like I'm not gonna be nice to somebody. Was that the same thing, or?
Yeah, it's the same thing. If we all work together, well, we're all in the same classroom. So if I'm positive, then potentially you'll be positive. It's hard for you not to be positive at the same time. It's hard for you not to link your mood with my mood. So as long as I stay positive, you guys will stay positive.
Yeah.
Okay. That's my theory anyway, and that tends to work. So if I'm working with somebody, and I'm acting, pissy, not bitchy, but pissy, if I'm acting pissy one day, then potentially they'll act pissy as well. The other day, Marius and I are buddies, and Marius came in. His son was having dental surgery, so he was really concerned. And he came in and he was acting really kind of erratic. He was scared that that his son wasn't going to get through the dental surgery very well. And I started acting, I knew that he was feeling bad, so I started acting very positive. And he had a call from his wife. And of course, he was mirroring my behavior, so she got mad at him because he wasn't as concerned as he should have been about it. And it's my fault.
I think that's what's kind of tricky is like you can try to be positive with somebody and then somehow it's taken out of context to really listen to what
Right.
it is they're going through.
Exactly.
So it's just like.
Right. Yeah, at funerals, everybody handles funerals differently. But sometimes if my family jokes at funerals, it's horrible. We make jokes at funerals. That's how we handle death. But other people get offended because, we're not serious enough about this dead person. And actually, we are serious about the dead person.
But other people have a different way of handling it too, right?
Everybody has a different way of handling it.
That's how me and some of my cousins are on my dad's side. Like after the funeral, they put their body away, and after the reception, afterwards,